Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to bring you my big Holy Priest Bible, the big old guide for Shadowlands Mythic Plus for Season 1, taking together all the knowledge, all the tips, tricks, and things that I can share with you guys for Holy Priest and how to maximize it to the fullest, to push the highest keys out there, highest keys possible, and make the most of the spec. Be sure to check as well in the description below. I've got timestamps for all of the different pieces of the video as we cover a lot of topics. And if you need to switch around and jump around between the different areas, it'll all be there for you in the description. Also, be sure to subscribe if you like the video. Really appreciate that. So let's get into it. Why in the world would you play Holy Priest in Mythic Plus, right? Pretty much the most frequent question I've gotten as I've been streaming and doing all these live keys and everything like that. And originally, it just started as something that I was like, oh, this would be kind of fun to play on some of the keys that I had already chested as discipline. And the more that I played it, the more I just enjoyed it and had fun with it. And it culminated really in the recent Grievous week that we had, where I just didn't want to play Disc in Grievous. I had already experienced Disc in Grievous. I hated playing it. It was just super annoying. And so I said, screw it. Let me just try to push as Holy Priest. If it's Troll, if it's bad, I'll just switch back to Disc and it'll be fine. And it turned out that Holy Priest absolutely just owned throughout as we were pushing higher keys. We were getting into the 21s, 22s, eventually got into the 23s as well. And I just felt extremely confident being able to heal through the damage. And this sort of culminated in healing delivery for one, where Holy Priest is able to deliver extremely efficient single target healing and be able to scale and stretch and layer that healing up to be able to heal the entire party in a pretty easy fashion in a lot of respects. While Discipline needs to blast damage into a target to be able to get some side healing, and then mainly they're using lots of Shadow Mend, Holy Priest is leveraging heal and their legendary powers, which we'll also talk about as well, to be able to make it the most out of that. And you also have a lot of very efficient support for it. So when it comes to healing Prideful as well, you know, you are able to do so in a very efficient manner and be able to very easily watch out for your allies as you go through it. So you do a great job of attrition healing. You do a great job of single target healing. Your mana is very efficient compared to Discipline. Your damage is also not that bad, as you're going to get more damage out of Discipline in many respects, be able to have, you know, Mind Seer and just generally an easier time multi-dotting enemies and maintaining those dots. But most of Holy Priest's damage doesn't really come from its dots. It's sort of front-loaded into Holy Fire, and just slamming down Holy Fire on cooldown is about good enough to be able to get competitive damage with Discipline. It's also very close enough that you're not going to like chest or not chest a key by playing one or the other. So in that regard, damage is close enough. In terms of utility, Holy Priest actually does a pretty good job with Guardian Spirit, especially when you can move it down to that 1 minute cooldown with how single target heavy healing focused that you are. Guardian Spirit can be great for just ignoring a target. It can be great for priority healing the target like the tank. It's very flexible. It's very frequent that you're going to be able to utilize it, and generally does its job quite well. Overall, Conduits do a pretty good job of just supporting that role and supporting that setup. And of course, you're just going to toss Power Infusion out to your allies the same as you usually would. You have a lot of that shared utility with Discipline in Mass Dispel with Bursting and Mind Soothe to generate good skips. You have a lot of that value that the other spec already has, and you're not really losing out by playing one or the other in that regard. So it's enjoyable. It does great with Grievous. It does great with Pugs. And you're pretty much always going to be able to heal through high levels of Prideful. And even when you're pugging, if people are not using any cooldowns, you're going to have a lot easier of a time being able to heal through it as a Holy Priest because you're so efficient. So, what makes that efficient type of build? Well, it's really the talents and the legendaries. So starting with the talents, Trail of Light, Feather, Guardian Angel, and Censure are the first four. Trail is going to synergize with your legendary, which we're about to get to. Guardian Angel lowers the cooldown of your Guardian Spirit to 1 minute as long as it doesn't proc its cheat death. You could run with Shining Force for Sanguine if you prefer. Usually I run Shining Force on Sanguine weeks, and then I run Censure otherwise. Censure is just generally nice to like stun priority targets to reduce a bit of the damage on the tank, reduce one of the caster mobs that you might see out there, something along those lines. It always helps. Since you're playing a very single target heavy type of build, you're going to be running with Surge of Light, Prayer Circle, and Prayer of Healing as well. Don't really get cast all that much at all. when you're playing with our legendary. And then you could run with Benediction or Divine Star. I personally prefer Benediction in the higher healing scenarios of higher level Pridefuls that deal a ton of damage to the party. Very difficult high-end bosses as well. Can be more challenging to heal. And if you're in a very dominant range meta like we're in right now, Divine Star is not really going to hit any allies, and having to reposition yourself to be able to get in there, toss a Divine Star out, and then get out before you start getting cleaved or start sitting in melee too long isn't really that efficient. Finally, capping us off, we've got Apotheosis, the absolute must, instantly resetting your Holy Words, which has a crazy amount of benefits that'll also be talked about in our playstyle section. So that'll be the setup. With regards to legendaries that I was just hinting at, Flash Concentration is going to be the play. If you're just starting off as a Holy Priest, you could run with Harmonious Apparatus to get yourself going. It's a lot less maintenance, but for pushing the highest of keys and getting the best possible results, I do recommend Flash Concentration, as it was really a legendary that I personally slept on quite a bit when I was playing the spec in beta and making videos about it in beta, because of, one, how annoying and difficult it is to be able to maintain, which is, one, going to get buffed. It's going to be a 20-second duration, up from 15 as 905 drops in March. So that's already going to be quite nice. But in general, you're going to be getting up to 1 second reduced cast time for heal, and it's going to be hitting 15% harder. It is more challenging to be able to maintain, but this legendary really heavily carries the spec as you go into higher keys. And when tanks are just getting so heavily obliterated right now on live servers, compared to on beta where we had broken trinkets or broken abilities that made tanks super strong, and I felt like I didn't need it as much, it's absolutely positively a must-have on live servers right now, especially as you go into dungeons like Spires of Ascension or The Other Side, which are really heavy single target damage in nature, but just especially as you go into higher keys, it is the go-to for you to be able to help you out. A lot of the challenge with this legendary is, again, just maintaining uptime. A lot of times I'm like dragging up the rear of the caboose with my team and everything as I'm trying to just maintain the buff before we get into the next trash pull, so I don't have to cast 4 or 5 flash heals at the beginning of the pull to be able to get my buff ready again. It can eat up some mana in that regard, but if you're able to leverage the free charges at a Surge of Light, if you're only forcing 1 flash heal every 13-14 seconds to maintain the 15-second buff up time, that's going to be totally fine as well. And a lot of times Surge of Light will help you with that in a lot of respects. So that's going to be the legendary. It's going to be the setup that you're going to go with. When it comes to Covenants and Conduits, personally, I've been running as Venthyr because I've been playing Discipline for progression, and you must play Venthyr there. But I do believe that, especially with 905 right around the corner, that Fey Guardians is going to be more of the future, both in a Mythic Plus, a high coordinated Mythic Plus environment. But I think it's also going to get even more value from a raid setup. I do like the Necrolords, and to be honest, I do like Venthyr as well when it comes for Holy Priest. I don't think the spec is crazy sensitive to which Covenant that you select, so if you strongly feel connected to one Covenant, I would say feel free to go for it, because it's not going to make or break your keys. Being able to have a variety of Covenants in your organized Mythic Plus environment is very important as well. For example, I'm the only Venthyr in my push group, so I will stay that way for probably quite a while. But I do love the ability of having Fey Guardians to reduce the cooldown of the damage for your mage or whoever else is out there in your group, so that instead of trying to heal through certain mechanics, you just kill them more rapidly by buffing a mage, buffing a hunter, buffing whoever to kill it more rapidly for you. The cooldown reduction that is offered by the Benevolent Fairy is going to reduce Divine Hymn, which is really not that great in dungeons, so you'd predominantly toss that out onto others. Being able to have that extra mana on hand can be pretty useful, and the damage reduction is just nice for the tank as well. So, Fey Guardians overall is quite nice, but again, like I said, I personally have been pushing as Venthyr. I'm the only Venthyr buff in our squad at the moment, and I would not say that you need to feel shackled to just one Covenant or anything to push high keys, right? Having Covenant options throughout your entire M+ group is very important. Now, one thing that you are pretty shackled to are your Conduits. Resonant Words is the absolute positively must-have conduit in that first slot. Casting a Holy Word spell increases the healing of your next flash or heal by X%. It's around 52%, I think it was what it is, around 213 item level. So this is an absolute must-have conduit. The second one that I usually run with, some people have been kind of on the fence and doing some different things, which has been interesting. Some people have been running with one of their later bonuses from their Soulbind instead of a second potency. Personally, I really like Lasting Spirit. The extra 2-second duration of GS doesn't really seem like much, but it's been very helpful for both Prideful and for tank support. And the healing bonus that it provides, bumping up your healing bonus to almost 80% bonus healing for 12 seconds is actually so incredibly nice, so that you can both top a tank, allow cleave healing to be able to top them, and just generally have a lot easier of a time supporting them. Because keep in mind, it's not just the healing that you're doing to them, but it's also the healing that they're doing to themselves. So when you're playing with a tank that can actually merit a pretty strong amount of self-healing, you know, in my case, I play with a Brewmaster Monk who has Celestial Fortune, which is whenever I heal him, he can sometimes replicate my healing, which is great, as well as his own healing spheres that he can run around and pick up or use. Expel harm? Question mark? Something like that, to be able to grab all the orbs together and heal himself. He's got the options there. I'm already able to funnel more healing into him, and we make great use of it together. So those conduit options work out just fine, and those have been pretty much my mainstays as well. Now, I mentioned previously about utilizing Apotheosis. One of the biggest things about Resonant Words is that you can basically Resonant Weave. You know, when you activate Apotheosis, you reset the cooldown of Serenity, Sanctify, and, of course, Chastise. All three of those abilities will proc Resonant Words and also refresh the buff. So if you're experiencing a lot of AoE damage and you want to be able to very efficiently be able to top allies, hitting Apotheosis, hitting your Serenity, followed by a heal, followed by either Sanctify or Chastise, followed by another heal, and then, once again, your next Holy Word, your next heal. When it comes to stats, gear, trinkets, all of those different things, pretty much running with like a haste crit build is going to be very preferred at most levels. You don't really need to have a lot of mastery on hand, even though it's pretty dominant in Castle Mastery's gear and just high item level gear. You want to be able to have at least a decent amount to help you with Prideful and everything here and there, but haste is really what's going to keep you alive throughout really high pressure scenarios. So for example, when you get into very challenging bosses like in Sanguine Depths, we have a very limited time to be able to top everybody before the next incoming damage. For example, on the very first boss, you know, you're going to be having the Shattering Smash, you're going to have to soak the orbs, you're going to be able to top everybody before the charge comes in, which you also have to soak. You already have efficient healing, you just need to be able to get it out quicker. And when you pair it up with like the Prideful buff, for example, you can play very aggressively with your mana and not use certain cooldowns like Apotheosis while you have Prideful, and instead just be very, very aggressive and get out many quick casts to be able to top your allies on that one. So, heavy haste. The higher that you go, the more important that versatility is. As you start getting into like the 20 plus levels, I'm certainly feeling how important it is. I personally need to be able to farm up some PvP gear or refocus my efforts in my weekly vault so that I can get more versatility, because survival becomes more of a factor as well. So if you're doing really high content, I'd say more haste verse. If you're just working to get 10, 12, 15, 17, 18, something around there type of levels, I would just go with a haste crit build and you'll be a-okay. When it comes to trinkets, usually I'm just running with a stat trinket, something like Cabalist's Hymnal, which I have right now, or Unbound Changeling. And I would also extremely heavily recommend pursuing the Tuft of Smoldering Plumage, whether it's from normal, heroic, mythic, raid, whichever. Being able to have this 2-minute cooldown, this delayed heal, which can also act as a cheat death effect, is so incredibly nice. It'd be very, very important to be able to grab this, because it starts, one, protecting your tank, but also being able to better allow you to set prioritization as you heal Prideful. Because when you're trying to heal 5 allies, all taking incredible amounts of pulsing damage at the same time, being able to drop a buff onto somebody, ignore them, and start healing other people and keeping other people healthier can go a really, really long way. Some of the most dangerous areas for a Holy Priest, for example, are areas where there's mass AoE damage and there's priority tank damage or more damage onto like a ranged target for something like Theater of Pain. That can happen very frequently and can be difficult to try to stretch your arms out and heal multiple different people at once. You're not the Disc Priest that has absorbs and damage reduction to preempt that, so you need to be able to muscle heal your way out of different scenarios, and that's what Tuft does a very good job of. Now, as I was just mentioning, healing Prideful can always be quite a challenge, but Holy Priest is one of the best healers, I think, to deal with it. That is because of the fact that you already have Divine Hymn at your disposal. You can also take advantage of Symbol of Hope in the downtime before the Prideful ally or the enemy spawns. So you already have some resources that are very mana efficient or mana returning to be able to allow you to continuously be healing through that incoming damage. But you also can start utilizing some of the heaviness of some of your abilities like Holy Words, as well as Guardian Spirit or, as I mentioned, Tuft, to be able to ignore certain allies or use your abilities to work with their cooldowns. For example, when you're playing with a mage, they got an ability called Alter Time, where they kind of take a snapshot of their health pool. Whenever they activate it over the course of the duration, they can jump back to that health pool level. So what I like to do a lot is drop the Serenity onto the mage, top them off fully, and then I say, hey, hit Alter, and then I ignore them for the next 5, 6 seconds, something like that, so that they slowly tick down, and then they activate Alter again, topping themselves off, right? Sometimes I'll pop Guardian Spirit on myself or on the Hunter and start channeling Divine Hymn, so I don't have to worry about that person bleeding out while I'm channeling the hymn, and they're going to be receiving more bonus healing. So you're already going to have a cheat death effect on hand, you have a healing bonus if they don't cheat, and you're going to be able to more easily deprioritize them. You know, those things are always really helpful. So the general cue of how I do it is I'll start drinking the second the Prideful enemy spawns. If I still need more mana, I'll activate Symbol immediately. I'll try to get my Holy Fire and Shatter of Pain up onto the enemy after that. And by that point, you're probably around 9 to 12 stacks of the Prideful. So I'll wait for Quaking, and I'll wait for a Belligerent Boast, which is the line effect. And then I'll channel my Divine Hymn and follow that up with Holy Words that I have on hand. Or if things are really bad and there's still a lot of HP left on the mob, then I'll activate Apotheosis and start following it up with Resonant Weaving. So I'll hit Serenity, into a heal, into a Sanctify, into a heal, into a Chastise, into a heal, to continuously be benefiting from that Resonant Words buff as much as I can. And then, because I have Apotheosis up, I get another Serenity cast. So you're able to really heavily overwhelm the targets with incoming healing. And all the while, throughout that sort of breakdown, you want to make sure you're maintaining that flash concentration buff so that you do not lose out on the very efficient bonus healing. So when it comes to healing tyrannical bosses, a lot of times, or just healing challenging bosses in general, a lot of times you'll see people are going to kill a prideful enemy, then go straight into that boss. So let's say for this example that, you know, you may have used Apotheosis in the trash back before, or you just didn't have it, or you got it back during Prideful, but you didn't need it. One of the biggest mistakes that I see whenever I've done coaching or when I've just kind of lurked in other streams is people, especially healers, using their cooldowns during Prideful. When I mentioned before, you want to run with a very heavy haste build. This is to be able to help you react and respond to heavy incoming damage, right? When it comes to Prideful, you have an effectively unlimited mana buff coming your way for about a minute. So with that, you want to make sure that you're using as little of throughput cooldowns as possible to survive so that you can just leverage this infinite mana to muscle heal through incoming damage. And then you start using your Apotheosis, your Divine Hymn, if you've got it, your Guardian Spirit, all those different things. Sometimes, you know, there's going to be emergencies and you have to use them, and that's okay. But the general priority, if possible, is to go into those bosses with the Prideful buff up and not having to use those very large cooldowns until later on. So, for example, the Great Proctor Beryllium in Sanguine Depths would go into that fight. There's a huge burst of incoming damage, followed up by a very brief period where you can spam, and then you're pretty much on the run. In that sort of a fight, I usually try to grab my orbs, plant my feet, top off whoever I can before I'm on the run, and then bank up Surge of Light procs and Holy Words to more easily be able to heal on the run before I'm able to start spamming again. That way, later on, when I am not as powerful and I don't have my 30% healing bonus out of Prideful, then I can start using Apotheosis on the move, Guardian Spirit on the move, to be able to more easily cover my bases and kind of cover a lot of my allies, right? A lot of times healers are in charge of calling all the defensives for your group. So with that in mind, you want to make sure that if there's going to be even the Inquisitor Torvald, where he's going to have his Castigate. Sometimes he'll have Castigates going up at the same time that he spawns his little ad buddy that's pulsing AoE out onto everybody. In that situation, you really do want to have people use their immunities, or you do want to use Guardian Spirit or your Serenity Holy Word as well. But in situations where the Castigate is just happening with nothing else going on, telling your DPS, hey, don't bother using anything here, I'm just going to muscle heal through you and you're going to be alright, is very, very important. Finding those areas where you're weakest to say, you need to be able to help me out here, or I'm going to use my big cooldown here, and then finding the areas where you're strongest and saying, I got this and I can cover my bases. Those things are always going to be super crazy important. They're always going to be a necessity when you're doing high keys, no matter what healer spec that you're playing. When it comes to just generally healing on trash mobs and how I want to use a lot of my cooldowns, Guardian Spirit is usually front and center because of how low of a CD that it is. Now, it's not a set and forget type of ability that you never need to touch the tank during the duration, but it does a great job at being able to minimize the amount of throughput required to be able to keep an eye on them. So, a lot of times I communicate with my tanks, let them know when I have Guardian Spirit, they should expect it to be near the beginning of pulls pretty consistently. A lot of times you'll see tanks put out a very large amount of healing up front very early on as you go into packs, which can be a great way to say, hey, if I know they're going to be fine, I can start churning out some damage, but if they're not, I can very quickly and easily switch gears into spamming them, topping them easily and efficiently. If worst comes to worst, you got your cheat death effect, and hey, you might have to have a longer cooldown on Guardian Spirit for a little while, but it'll come back and you'll be able to take advantage of it again very soon. When it comes to trying to get out early stuns out of something like Censure with Chastise, I usually try to go as early as possible, especially looking for mobs kind of like the Gargans out of Halls of Atonement, those really high priority damage target mobs on hand. You can even bank it sometimes if you wanted to interrupt, for example, the Loyal Beasts. But if your group's coordinated, they already got that down pat, or they have expectations as to who is going to lock that down, and they don't really set up expectations for what they want you to stun, you can sit back with it and wait and see if somebody messes up, but you can also be more proactive and start looking at your nameplates and identifying the most high tank damage enemies, or even party-wide damage enemies that might be casters, for example, and then just stun locking them as quickly and efficiently as you possibly can. Apotheosis usually is going to be up for one of the trash packs, and then it'll be available for Prideful, and then you kind of go back and forth between those two, right? So usually you can get very frequent casts, and you usually can get 10 plus uses out of it per dungeon. I've been very guilty of trying to hold on to Apotheosis until the next key from time to time, but when you are doing that, you may also notice that you burn through mana more rapidly. Preemptive use out of Apotheosis will help you more easily sustain your mana and go into Prideful with higher levels of mana, go into boss fights with higher levels of mana, and just generally give you an easier time. So understanding there is going to be that extra global cooldown that's on hand. A lot of times I'll look for areas where my tank starts kiting as areas where I will take advantage of popping Apotheosis. Once he will start kiting, Brewmaster, for example, staggers their damage, they take it with them. So he may need a quick follow-up heal even if he's out of melee. That's a really big area where I'll say, let me pop Apotheosis, let me drop a big heal into him, let me get out of stun on a priority target, stabilize him, let him know that he can go back in when he feels safe. Those things like that are very important, and once again, like I mentioned, once you have the Prideful buff fall off, that's another big area where you want to be able to lean on heavy cooldowns once you no longer have the 30% healing bonus or unlimited mana. And finally, just general gameplay, some of the biggest things, some of the biggest pitfalls that I see for a lot of new players is going to be maintaining flash concentration stacks. It can be a very large pain to be able to deal with, but your priority as you're going to be going into those dungeons is going to be built off the back of maintaining flash concentration, using holy words about as frequently as they'll be efficient to use. Sometimes I'll even just drop a Sanctify onto the tank and a melee player just to get that resonant word proc. If I know that I'm not going to get efficient use out of Sanctify for a very long time, I'll just use it anyway to get a quick heal when I'm on the move. Keep in mind, Prayer Bending, Circle of Healing are extremely efficient and should be used on cooldown as long as You know, circle healing is going to heal a couple targets. Prayer Mending, just keep on slamming it down. I'll even use Shadow or Death if I have a lot of Prayer Mending stacks on myself to damage an enemy, damage myself, cause Prayer Mending to jump, and get more value. After that, you're going to be using primarily heal just to be able to spot heal and give triage to injured allies. And once again, making sure that you're able to identify who is in the greatest chance of getting follow-up damage. You know, when you start seeing multiple targets taking heavy hits, the thing to do is not to panic, but to think about, well, what's the follow-up to this? You might see in Necrotic Wake where certain allies might get frontaled by some of the bone skeletons, but they won't take any other damage because unless they sit in another frontal, you know, they're not going to die. They're not going to get hit by anything else around them. But you might see some other areas, for example, with a whole heap of caster mobs on hand, or some of the huntsmen, for example, from Halls of Atonement just cleaving onto everybody. Even in Mr. Tyrannus' mobs just cleaving onto everybody. Then you need to actually flex over and spam heal a lot of different allies. Think about where the damage is coming from, what's the follow-up, what's the follow-through that enemies might do to try to kill your allies, and then start triaging from there. Especially when it comes to Prideful, start learning how much damage each tick of Prideful is doing, what it's doing to your raid frames, so that you can bounce around to your different allies to take advantage of your very powerful heal effect, but also the cleave effect that is given from Trail of Light, so that you can efficiently jump between many different targets and you're not having heavy imbalances of health. Those are all really important fundamentals that also do end up coming with time. So time, practice, experience are going to go a very long way. And the more that you're going to be able to study up, learn fights, if you'd like to check it out, I've got all of the different high keys that I've got highlighted on my Twitch channel, so be sure to check that out, link to the description below. And I'm always on hand, whether it's on my stream or when on my Discord, to be able to answer you guys' questions. So if you like the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, as that does help out quite a lot. And thank you so much for sitting through all of the different crazy tips, tricks, and advice that I have for you guys. If you have anything that I might have missed, be sure to let me know in the description below. But otherwise, that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it and found it useful, and I'll catch you all next time.